Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and in today's edition we will have a discussion on the emerging security scenario in the Korean Peninsula. North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs dominated Asia-Pacific's geopolitical landscape in 2017. The new year began with both North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and US President Donald Trump exchanging verbal barbs over their nuclear capabilities. However, in a surprise and extraordinary move, North and South Korea appear to be embracing talks aimed at reducing tensions between the two neighbors. Officials from the two nations met face-to-face for the first time in 2 years this week, while North Korea has decided to participate in next month's Winter Olympics to be held in South Korea. Both sides have also agreed to hold talks to ease military tensions on the Korean Peninsula. While the recent thaw in relations between the two Koreas is important, the big question is whether this new round of talks between North and South will be able to make some significant contribution towards bringing the nuclear weapons crisis in Korean Peninsula to a peaceful end. For more on this, we are joined by a distinguished panel of guests today. Let me introduce you to them, starting with Mr. Skand Tayal, former ambassador to South Korea. We also have with us Mr. Sheel Sharma, former permanent representative at IAEA. And we also have with us Dr. Sandip Mishra from School of International Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome all of you to Rajya Sabha TV studio. Let me begin with you, Mr. Tayal. You've been there in South Korea as India's representative. One thing which we would like to understand as of now is that this is the first time in 2 years specifically that a face-to-face dialogue is happening between the representatives of two Koreas, that's North and South. How significant is this dialogue?
It is very significant, and we have to appreciate that President Moon Jae-in belongs to the same tradition, liberal tradition of South Korean politics, which is for unconditional dialogue with North Korea, as No Myung-hun and Kim Dae-jung earlier they had been pursuing. And President Moon Jae-in was the chief staff of President No Myung-hun. Now, it also reveals that it is very clear that America and South Korea are not on the same track.
Okay.
For South Korea, Moon Jae-in, the primary foremost priority is no war on Korean Peninsula.
Okay.
Whereas for America, the foremost priority is denuclearization is not possible, but North Korea should not have capacity to strike at the mainland South America. Now, South Koreans have realized that if South Korea wants to destroy Seoul, it can destroy it without nuclear weapons, with conventional weapons. So, in all that background, the two Koreas have perhaps are coming to some kind of an arrangement that there will be some peace and reconciliation, as it was mentioned in the joint statement also after yesterday's talks, and reduce tensions on Korean Peninsula so that there is no threat of war on Korean Peninsula.
Okay.
And now in that, how will America's objective of stopping this nuclearization, further nuclearization of North Korea will work? It is for future to tell, but it clearly shows that South Korea and North Korea are opening a dialogue, and United States will have to adjust to it.
Okay, quite interesting that aspect as well. We will look in as to how South Korea is viewing United States and its stand. Let me bring in Mr. Sheel Sharma on this. Mr. Sharma, very important to note out here is that in 2017 we saw a number of tests being undertaken by the North Korean regime, and you know, those despite the condemnation from several world powers as well. In the first week of the new year, we witnessed that, you know, a heightened war of words between Kim Jong-un and President Trump as well. So in that context, do you believe that this dialogue process which is started now will have some standing in this entire situation? Will it mean some strong words?
I think beneath the tweets from White House, I detect a certain method. There is that familiar, you know, good cop, bad cop kind of a thing. You have Tillerson talking of talks, then White House throwing cold water on that. Then Tillerson again speaking about it in Security Council and saying the North Koreans have to earn it. So when they say earn it, that means they have to do something. Now, when South Koreans go to China, the story from in New York Times was that the Chinese treated the South Korean president very, very slovenly. He was allowed to eat in his hotel room, and so that was Chinese way of putting him on the cold, trying to say that, look, if you are going to get these ABM systems from the US, then we have a problem. So these are the political forces which have been working on North Korea and South Korea. So this kind of a very beginnings of thaw, which is witnessed now, which Ambassador Tayal mentioned, is the result of this whole blow hot, blow cold.
Okay.
And the world is also keen, because you see, of the 6 nations who were part of the dialogue, US, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, China, Russia, 3 of them, South Korea, China and Russia, do not want conflagration. Okay. So US is the only one who's talking of giving up that strategic patience. Japan also is hard in this matter. But the advisors of Trump and the security establishment in the US now is slowly wearing down to that strategic patience which was Obama's policy, and before him, even George Bush. So the reason for strategic patience is that North Korea has support of its neighbors. Today, Russia is supporting it. You would have seen there was an interesting intelligence story that the US intelligence community found that they were way off the mark in their assessment of North Korean capability. They said they had anticipated that North Koreans would have ICBMs a few years down the line, not now.
But they ended up testing them.
So, and they found that the track they were following was different. The North Koreans apparently have abandoned that earlier track, and now they are saying that maybe some Russian technology fellows have been helping them. Not state as such, but Russian scientists have been helping them. Now that puts a different spin to the whole thing, you see. So in that kind of a situation, talks are better. Then,
howsoever small the beginning may be, but it is better to begin somewhere and then take it from there.
And North Koreans are clever. They are telling South Koreans, we will talk.
Okay.
But don't talk of nuclear. Nuclear is not against you. Nuclear is against the big bully.
Big bullies.
So, it carries a certain conviction with the South Koreans, who are also scared. So it's a very subtle game which is going on.
Okay, so let me bring in Dr. Mishra here. Dr. Mishra, quite interesting point which has been made by Mr. Sheel Sharma, that this is about finding convictions between each other's in each other's arguments between North and South. That is what is happening out here. The beginning may be very small, but the beginning itself is very significant given the kind of crisis we are staring at. A state which has nuclear weapons, which a superpower terms as rogue, is supported by other 2 superpowers. So it's a very complex situation.
I fully agree. I think it's a very difficult situation, very complex situation, and I really appreciate a beginning between South and North Korea. But still, we have to be still watchful about the future events, because today I was reading North Korean newspaper, only newspaper they have, Nodong Sinmun, and the issue has been reported on the 4th page, and just 2-3 columns, small news item talking about this inter-Korea dialogue. So then I think North Korean head of delegate, Lee Song-wan, he mentioned, actually some South Korean media houses, they reported that there was some discussion about denuclearization issue also. He very vehemently opposed that, no, there was no discussion about denuclearization. What I'm trying to say that, this basically talk between South and North Korea, it's a welcome development, but it was still limited to so-called Pyeongchang Olympic and North Korean participation. Now, the basic problem in approaching North Korea is that North Korea wants that international community, including South Korea, they should talk to North Korea, accepting North Korea as a nuclear power. Whereas international community, including South Korea, had been trying to convince or trying to pressurize North Korea that you denuclearize yourself first, and then there could be any talk possible. So when this, you can say the main issue comes actually, how things are going to flare up, that's going to be seen, one. And secondly, I will say that, look, for so many, I can say decades, I can say, North Koreans, they have been talking about their dialogue with America. They want to discuss with America. They want to resolve conflict on Korean Peninsula and region. by talking to America directly, bilaterally. America has not been giving that kind of hearing to them. Sometimes 1994 they gave small hearings, some accord was made. So I think still whether America is willing to talk to North Korea, accepting de facto nuclear and missile program of North Korea, talking about peace, and maybe in the future think about bringing denuclearization also on the negotiation table. That's going to be, I can say, seen that whether Trump administration is ready to do that. Otherwise, if Trump is not ready to do that, as Ambassador Tayal mentioned, South Korean new president Moon Jae-in, he is quite willing to have dialogue with North Korea. They may try to have some kind of, say, you can say suboptimal level, actually some kind of, say, dialogue and contact between two Koreas.
At least open the hotline between their militaries, which they're trying to do right now. Let me bring in Mr. Tayal again on this. Mr. Tayal, the point which you mentioned in your initial statement, in which Dr. Mishra came back to, that is, how is the relation developing between South Korea and the United States as of now in this particular situation? If you look at the Trump administration and the way you pointed out, it looks like South Korea doesn't seem to be too comfortable with the kind of stand which is being taken by the Trump administration. And if you look at numbers and figures, then since Donald Trump has come to power, there have been almost 24 missile tests by a North Korean regime. Out of them, 15 are termed to be missiles which are nuclear capable. So a lot of pressure building on United States administration as well. So is this the right way which Trump administration is reacting, or is this something which might add more fuel to the fire?
Two things. One, definitely Koreans of all persuasions are very uncertain how President Trump will react, and nobody wants war in Korean Peninsula. Okay. So that is the one part. Second, we have to give credit to Kim Jong-un that he totally controls the agenda. Whenever he wants, he can escalate. Whenever he wants, he can de-escalate. Whenever he wants, he can go for talks or keep on firing missiles and nuclear technology. Here, I feel that sanctions are perhaps finally biting. Because in the latest sanctions of November, there has been a limit on fuel exports. Now, China, as usual, was playing a double game. They were telling Americans and everybody, international community, that they are following the sanctions. But on the high seas, their ships and with their connivance, all kinds of ships were transferring oil, etc. to North Korean vessels. Now, 2 vessels were caught and seized by South Korea. Now, so that may have troubled Kim Jong-un to give some kind of a signal, so that at least South Korea will stop capturing these vessels on the high seas, and he will continue to get oil from all kinds of sources to North Korea. But how it will play out as we go along, of course, perhaps the Olympics, Winter Olympics will be held peacefully without any difficulty. But after that, again, whether North Korea has really acquired the capacity to strike at US mainland, which it claims it has, whereas the American intelligence community, American president, they all believe that still it is a claim, and they really do not have re-entry capacity, etc.
Okay.
But if North Korea again tests a missile or a nuclear weapon, then how all these parties, as Ambassador Sharma said, will react. Japan will react, China will react, but sanctions must continue, and sanctions must continue to bite. Only then North Korea will remain on this path of negotiations. Okay,
let me bring in Mr. Sharma on these 2 points, the sanctions as well as the China part, a very significant player in this entire context. And, as Ambassador Tayal was pointing out that, the sanctions this time around seems to be, started biting the North Korean regime. But one argument which has been given by the United States administration against China has been that they've not been too willing to inflict those tangible sanctions on North Koreans. So how do you see China playing, this game this time around? Because we are at a level right now wherein both sides, both neighbors are talking to each other. One neighbor, which is an ally of United States, is not comfortable with United States. The other one is trying to draw parallels from that and some benefits. So how do you see China playing it along?
The Chinese, their influence on North Korea, their purpose is to increase it, not decrease it, diminish it. So how can they increase their influence on North Korea? if they put the full sanctions, North Koreans will go out of their hands.
That would obviously not serve their purpose.
No, and then Chinese, if you look at from Beijing, if the Korean Peninsula goes in this direction, the US, then it's a threat to the Chinese. If South Korean strategy wins, then they are not happy. So they don't want to abandon North Korea. And China is not alone. Russia is also on the same page, more or less. Russia and China both today are opposed to this this kind of a bombastic talk which is coming out from
the Trump administration.
Washington. So they are, there is a certain lineup there, which reminds you of the Cold War. But on the other hand, you have, as Ambassador Tayal mentioned, the Security Council, where 15-0 was the vote on sanctions. Nobody abstained, nobody even... so the message is clear that all of them want a peaceful diplomatic resolution of the problem and away from conflagration. So some pressure is definitely working on North Korea. And when you talk like that about pressures, there is always a double talk possible. Like the bigger power tells you, look, I'm trying to help you, but you understand the situation, so at least show something. Show something. So this is the way that it works.
Okay. So this is the way it would work as far as China is concerned.
And also don't go overboard. I mean, we must, in this whole discussion, we must realize that for the first time, there's a non-superpower or non-great power which is threatening the US mainland. They are now throwing uncertainties that re-entry and this and that. But if you ask a US strategic expert saying, how do you view this? It's a little scary. So Trump is not alone. The Republican Party also is not very happy with this kind of a denouement.
Okay, so moving away from even terming that as superpower, they term North Korean regime as a rogue country. So obviously this has rang a lot of.
But a rogue is now threatening. No other rogue has ever been able to threaten the US mainland.
So that is quite significant. We'll take it from China to Japan. Let me bring in Dr. Mishra on this. Dr. Mishra, if you look at another player, that's Japan around here. It looks like domestically speaking, for the Japanese Prime Minister, this seems to be a sort of a win-win situation. Domestically speaking, he is able to go ahead and win arguments as well. But on the security aspect of it, we've just had, United States clearing $133 million anti-ballistic missile sale to Japan. So how is that going to impact? Because one, you're talking about dialogue process between the two Koreas. Two, you're arming another neighbor on the other side. So
that's true. I think if I look at actually diplomacy and overall military strategy of all the, you can say, surrounding countries, I personally believe that probably the two biggest gainers are North Korea and Japan. I think all other party like China, United States, South Korea, they have not been very clear about their diplomacy, the goal of their diplomacy or their military strategy. In case of Japan, like Shinzo Abe, actually he had been able to very well argue that, look, Japan needs a very strong leadership, and which is basically Shinzo Abe himself. And that's why he preponed actually elections in Japan. Like he preponed and had this election because that makes him more popular, that makes him, and suppose arms sale and all those, you can say, armament, Japan becoming a normal country, Japan becoming a stronger country, all these things which Shinzo Abe has been arguing for so many years, I think that could be fulfilled by a very warm, a very, you can say, hot Korean Peninsula. So I think he had been quite happy with the way Trump had been making strong.
So at least the situation has overcome the post-war pacifism, sentiment which has been prevailing in Japan.
Yeah.
For some time.
So that provides Shinzo Abe a very good justification to go ahead with so-called their, like, revising his peace constitution, making Japan a normal country, having, say, as you mentioned about recent, you can say, anti-ballistic missiles which were actually bought from America. So all these things actually possible, and I think we had discussion that somehow because of that, Japan economy first time is having some kind of, say, some like 1.8% growth rate and something. So I think this is good for Japan. So Japan and North Korea both, they have been happy with the situation. They have been able to fulfill their foreign policy goals. I'm not sure about other countries, how they have been dealing and how.
Okay, you're saying that at least Japan and North Korea has been, get some tangibles from this particular situation. Let me bring in Ambassador Tayal on this. Ambassador Tayal, you've been there in the region. Do you agree with what Dr. Mishra is pointing out, that Japan and North Korea seems to be the countries or the regimes who have been able to derive the maximum out of this particular situation?
Certainly, because South Korea will be happy with status quo as it was 2 years back. United States will be happy with that status quo. Japan, Shinzo Abe is not happy. He wants to militarize, he wants to have a more robust foreign policy, a more aggressive, forward-looking and international kind of a military capacity, etc. So all this tension has been used by him very, very cleverly. And there is a sentiment in favor of a little more militarization of Japan, which will help him. And North Korea is working as per a plan. It is a long-term plan which was started by his grandfather, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, continued by Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-un is on the same track to have nuclear capacity as a deterrent, to ensure regime survival, and perhaps in his last years, all those missile tests, etc., he has achieved that.
Okay.
But from now, where will North Korea go? Is it their ambition only to have regime survival and end there? Or they want to be more adventurous, they want to have more claims on northern limit line, or have some kind of territorial ambitions? That future will tell. Because perhaps the world can live with a nuclear North Korea. North Korea is not Taliban. They are not trying to change the world. They are not going to attack China or Russia or even South Korea. They just want perhaps regime survival. Whereas a nuclear bomb in the hands of a Taliban kind of a outfit will be absolute disaster. So one has to be very clear that what are the implications of North Korean nuclear. We should not go totally by the American propaganda or whatever American fears and apprehensions are. As far as India is concerned, we can live with a nuclear North Korea as long as there is no nexus between North Korea and Pakistan. And in fact, in my personal view, we will be happy if Japan also goes nuclear in response to North Korea going nuclear.
North Korea. Okay, that's you're taking one step ahead. Let's coming back to this. Let me bring in Mr. Sharma on this. Mr. Sharma, if you look at the entire situation and the way both Dr. Mishra is pointing out and Mr. Tayal is pointing out, in this particular situation, Japan seems to be not very happy with the status quo. North Korea would also want a little more. South Korea would want to go back to the situation which was there 2 years ago. In this entire situation, it is being, there are these analyses which are being thrown in from, some corners wherein there's a talk about the idea of preemptive strike from the United States. But ideas like these, what kind of, threat do they hold to this entire dialogue process which is now started emerging? Because this would then take the situation on an entirely different platform.
I think as we were discussing earlier, maybe before the talks, the time for preemption is passé. The global alignment of forces is different today. It's not a monopolar world today. In '94, when Carter tried to strike peace, US was preeminent power. But even then, they did not look for kind of a preemption.
So now that's not an option on the table.
Today, I think that option is very difficult, unless they are talking of transnuclear, in the sense that using other technologies, which are conventional technologies but it is as crude as that North Korea will say, do whatever you like, I'm going to use mine. Because this whole nuclear age over the last 70 years, the weaker power, when it senses the threat, it says, I'm going to go all overboard. So that is deterrent. So that is the reason why North Korea's nuclear capabilities now is a fact of life. I don't think anyone should delude himself.
And you're saying all stakeholders will have to live with this fact?
They have to live with this. And so the situation in the Western Pacific, on the Korean Peninsula, Japan, China, is new today, where the extended deterrence of the US has been fraying at the edges, and Japan sees the threat, but whatever it does, China is a very different power altogether. China is aggressive, it is much more powerful, economy is robust. So any kind of a push or pushing the envelope as the world goes has a lot of risks. So because of that, the situation needs delicate handling, and any kind of excessive talk is more destabilizing. That's the reason you find the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists in middle of last year increased the time or decreased the time, the doomsday clock moved 2.5 minutes to midnight because of these fears that suddenly, as they say, one tantrum away from the brink.
Okay. So you're saying that the best idea is to go ahead and live with the fact that there is a regime,
manage it,
and try and find and manage it. Let's also have concluding comments from Dr. Mishra on this. Dr. Mishra, what's the way forward?
I think we had a right discussion about the issue that ultimately this is North Korea has become a de facto nuclear power that we have to recognize.
Okay.
Without that, you can't move forward. That's one. Two, they are not willing to give up their nuclear program at any cost. So they have been talking about irreversibility. They have been talking about non-negotiable nuclear program. So we have to accept it. And then, as Ambassador Sharma was talking about, we could think about how to manage it. The third option could be how to denuclearize it. But this third option will come maybe after 5 years, after 6 years of building some minimum trust between
some rapport with the regime.
Some between South Korea and North Korea, United States and North Korea. And ultimately, in my opinion, North Koreans, they need a nuclear weapons. They must be having some kind of rational region for that. So if we are try to understand those rationals, if we are able to address those problems, maybe in long term we could convince North Korea to denuclearize. But at this point of time, it would be better to accept a de facto nuclear North Korea.
At this point in time, as our panelists are pointing out, it is important for all the stakeholders to realize the ground situation, accept those realities and not push the envelope too far away. Although there are going to be twists and turns in this entire situation, because all of us know that North Korea has a history of playing bait and snitch, entering negotiations, extracting concessions and then walking away and upping the ante. But those are things to be tackled in the future. We'll come back again next time with a different set of guests and different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.